I didn't even want to go to that party. That Thursday night had already been long. I'd had back-to-back client calls all afternoon, and the last thing I wanted was to stand around in some hipster bar pretending to enjoy overpriced drinks with people I barely knew. But Cindy insisted. It was for Mallory, her best friend from college, who just got promoted to senior curator at one of the downtown galleries. Apparently, it was a big deal. "You're not going to skip it," Cindy told me, already halfway into her eyeliner when I got home. "It'll look weird if you don't show." That was her thing lately, appearances. How we looked. How we sounded. How our relationship looked from the outside. I didn't argue. I never really did with Cindy, not anymore. So I changed into something halfway decent and followed her into the Uber. We got there around 8. It was one of those Portland bars that tries too hard to be minimalist, black walls, chalkboard menu, Edison bulbs. There was an art installation made out of wire and moss hanging over the bar. Everyone there looked like they either sold NFTs or wrote angry op-eds. I recognized a few of Cindy's gallery co-workers and one of Mallory's exes, who gave me a vague nod and then disappeared into the crowd. Cindy ordered drinks for both of us without asking what I wanted, something bright pink that smelled like lime and vodka. I sipped it in silence. I stood off to the side, mostly watching her flit from conversation to conversation. She was in her element, laughing too loudly, gesturing with both hands, always being the center of attention. I used to love that about her, how magnetic she could be when she turned it on. Lately, though, it felt more like a performance. Like she had someone else in mind when she was smiling like that. Then came the toast. Someone clinked their glass and called for attention, and Cindy stepped forward like it had been her stage all along. She held her drink up, high and proud, and began thanking everyone for coming. It was all pretty standard until the end. "Let's raise a glass," she said, voice lilting with mock seriousness, "to the women who succeed, even with certain toxic men in their lives." The whole group laughed. Not politely, loudly. Like she just delivered a zinger at a comedy club. She wasn't laughing, though. She was looking straight at me. Locked in. Unblinking. It hit me like a slap. My stomach tightened, and for a second I felt like I was floating outside my body, trying to figure out if everyone else saw it too. Some did, I think. Mallory glanced at me and then quickly looked away. One of Cindy's coworkers smirked into her drink. I didn't say anything. Didn't make a scene. Just smiled like it didn't bother me and looked down into my glass. What was I supposed to say? That my wife, in front of a room full of people, had just aired out some private bitterness and dressed it up like a punchline? I didn't even know what toxic meant in that context. Maybe it was real, maybe it was just one of those trendy insults people throw around now when they want to shame someone without specifics. I didn't want to ask. I just wanted to get through the night. Later, while Cindy was talking to someone from the gallery, some guy in a turtleneck who looked like he only ate food with foreign labels, I stayed by the tall table where we'd been sitting. Her phone was still there, face up. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't checking. It just lit up on its own. A message preview. From an unsaved number. There was a photo. Just the thumbnail. But it was enough. Cindy, sitting on a couch or maybe a padded bench, her legs tucked slightly to one side, perched on someone's lap. A man's lap. His face wasn't visible, just part of his jaw and neck. But his hand was clear, resting casually, possessively on her thigh. And Cindy was smiling. Not fake smiling. Not the party smile she wore around strangers. A real one. Relaxed. An asterisk mate. The kind of smile I hadn't seen directed at me in a long time. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing. Just then, she reappeared behind me. I don't know if she saw the look on my face or if she noticed her phone lighting up, but she snatched it off the table like it was about to explode. "Oh," she said, unlocking it with a practiced flick of her thumb. It's a joke. From Mallory's boyfriend. He's always messing around, editing photos to be stupid. It's not real." She laughed. A sharp, forced sound. I looked at her. She wasn't looking back. Her eyes were already somewhere else. Maybe on the conversation she planned to jump into next. Maybe on her own escape route. She didn't explain further. Didn't offer to show me the full photo. Didn't try to pull me aside and ask if I was okay. Just like that, it was over. The seed was planted. It didn't even need water. I stayed another 40 minutes. Milled around. Made small talk with someone who used to be in Cindy's MFA program. Listened to a conversation about NFTs that I didn't understand and didn't want to. Pretended to care about a startup someone was launching that had something to do with sustainable art distribution. The whole time, my brain kept replaying that image. Her on someone else's lap. His hand on her thigh. Her smile. I didn't say anything to her on the ride home. She talked about the party. About how good Mallory looked. About how ridiculous some guy's hat was. I nodded when I had to, stared out the window the rest of the time. That night, we didn't argue. We didn't talk. She went to bed first. I stayed downstairs for a while. I think I watched a rerun of something, I don't even remember what. Around 2 a.m. I quietly packed a duffel bag. Just clothes, laptop chargers. Left the house keys on the kitchen counter. I sent her a text before I shut the front door. I'll be staying somewhere else for a bit. Don't call me. It wasn't about the photo. Not really. That image was just the match. The gasoline had been leaking for months. Cindy hadn't even tried to explain. Not in any real way. And deep down I knew she wouldn't. She'd find a way to turn it around, make it about my silence, my work schedule, my lack of emotional availability. That was her specialty, guilt like glitter. It stuck even when it didn't make sense. I didn't know where I was going that night. I didn't care. All I knew was that I wasn't staying in that house with her. Not after that look during the toast. Not after that message. Not after the sound of her voice, laughing off something that didn't feel like a joke. The silence in the car was louder than anything she could have said. And somehow, I think she knew that too. Moving out felt like stepping into someone else's life. I hadn't planned it, hadn't packed properly, hadn't even picked a place, I just drove. I ended up staying in a short-term rental on the edge of Beaverton, the kind of place that was meant for traveling tech workers. It had clean sheets, a coffee machine that blinked like a slot machine, and enough space to feel lonely in. I told myself it was temporary. A couple days. A week, maybe? Just until I cooled off and figured out what that photo really meant. But each morning I stayed away, the weight of it all started pressing in. I didn't miss her. I missed the illusion of peace, the convenience of our routine. But Cindy? No. Not after everything started clicking into place. It's weird how your brain does this thing, how it starts rewatching old footage with a new filter. I'd lay awake some nights and think about moments that never made sense at the time but now screamed at me. Like that weekend back in March when she said she was going to a women's retreat in Central Oregon. She told me not to worry if she didn't have cell signal, there'd be meditation and forest bathing, and no tech was part of the healing. I bought it. Even dropped her off at the pickup lot. She had a yoga mat and a duffel bag and a playlist called Inner Stillness. But 2 days in, I got a text from Paul, a friend of ours who we hadn't seen much of lately. He'd been visiting family in Salem and he messaged me out of nowhere, thought I saw Cindy at Bon Vino last night. Weird, huh? At the time, I'd brushed it off. Told myself he must have been mistaken. But now? Now I remembered the specific way she said, "Don't worry if I don't answer," before getting on that shuttle. And how she came back with no photos, no stories. Just said it was quiet and exactly what she needed. That phrase haunted me. Exactly what I needed. Like she was coming back from something else entirely. And then there were the jogs. Cindy had never been into running. She once told me, dead serious, that jogging was a cult disguised as exercise. But then in early summer, she suddenly started going on these evening jogs. Always alone. Always without her fitness watch. No Instagram stories. No playlist prep. Just changed into running gear, left for 40 minutes, and came back drenched and out of breath. I'd asked once if she wanted company. She laughed like I'd suggested she run in heels. "You'd ruin my rhythm," she said, already pulling her shoes on. "It's kind of my only time to disconnect." At first, I respected that. Everyone needs their outlet. But now those runs look different. Suspicious. Manufactured. Like she needed a reason to disappear. Another memory, this one small but sticky, was about the lingerie. There was a time when Cindy made fun of it. Back when we first started dating, she called it consumerist nonsense, said in asterisk Macy wasn't about lace or frills. That kind of stuff was for insecure couples trying too hard. But in the last 6 months, I noticed a few new sets in the laundry. Expensive brands. Tags I didn't recognize. Delicate lace and satin, the kind you'd notice because you weren't supposed to. Once I asked about a crimson set I found drying on the towel rack. She shrugged. "Mallory gave it to me for my birthday." Weird, right? That was a lie. Her birthday had been 3 months earlier, and Mallory's gift was a painting class gift card. I remembered because Cindy had scoffed at it and said she didn't have the patience for adult hobby time. She wasn't even trying to cover it well. The next thing that jumped out was the bathroom calls. For years, Cindy hated talking on the phone, said it was a boomer thing and preferred texting. But lately, she'd step into the bathroom and take calls with the water running. Her voice low, sometimes laughing. If I knocked or came near, she'd go quiet until I walked away. Once, I caught the tail end of a call as she left the bathroom. Her phone was still in her hand, and she didn't see me standing at the end of the hall. She said, Okay, I'll see you Friday then. Same time. When she noticed me, she flinched, just slightly, then smiled like nothing had happened. Mom, she said, holding up her phone. Her internet's out again. I swear I need to just teach her Morse code. She kissed my cheek and walked away. It wasn't her mom. I don't know how I knew. I just did. And then there was the shower thing. Cindy always showered in the morning. Always. She said nighttime showers made her hair greasy and messed up her sleep schedule. But twice, 2 specific times. I came home early and found her fresh out of the shower in the middle of the afternoon. Once on a Tuesday. Another time on a Saturday when she thought I'd be at the design studio all day. Both times, her hair was wet. She smelled like expensive soap I didn't recognize, and she was lying on top of the comforter, scrolling aimlessly like she was trying to look relaxed. But her eyes always sh*t to the clock when she heard me come in. I didn't question it back then, just figured she was decompressing. But now it didn't feel like decompressing. Felt like she was rinsing someone else off. After I moved out, we barely spoke. She sent a couple texts asking where I was, if I was okay when I was coming back. I didn't respond. I needed space to think without the fog of her explanations. I needed to figure out if I was being paranoid, or if I'd spent the last 6 months blind to something obvious. By the end of the first week, I'd started writing things down. A list, not to be petty, but to make sense of it all. Little things that had felt off. Glances that lingered. Mood swings that didn't track. Half conversations I walked in on and was told were nothing. When I read through the list, it felt like I was looking at someone else's marriage. Who had I been with? Who was I living with? A few days later, I got a message from Lisa, a mutual friend. She said she wasn't sure if it was her place, but something had been bothering her. Apparently, back in July, she saw Cindy at a rooftop party downtown. She was with a guy no one recognized, and they were close, holding hands under the table, whispering in each other's ears. She thought I knew, that we were maybe open or taking a break. Cindy had mentioned something vague like, "Things are complicated." Lisa apologized for not saying anything sooner. I told her thank you. That's when the gravity of it all finally hit. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't just a photo on a phone or a weird toast at a party. This was a pattern, a deliberate one, an architecture of deceit she'd been building for months, maybe longer. I spent the rest of that night staring at the ceiling. I wasn't angry yet, not really. I was hollow, tired. Betrayal doesn't hit like a slap. It bleeds in slow. That's when I decided to take the next step. Not revenge, not confrontation. I needed confirmation. I used to think that hiring a private investigator was something people only did in movies or bitter custody battles. But there I was, 1 week after moving out, sitting across from a man named Clark Benton in a strip mall office wedged between a vape shop and a reflexology place. He had that unblinking calm of someone who's seen too much and learned to compartmentalize it. Clark didn't blink when I told him what I suspected. I gave him the list, the weird jogging schedule, the retreat lie, the late-night calls, the photo. I watched his pen glide over a yellow notepad, methodical, emotionless. "How do you want this done?" he asked. "I want the truth," I said. "Not speculation, not guesswork. I need proof, if there's something to find." He nodded. "There always is." For the next 3 weeks, Clark's updates came through encrypted email. GPS logs, time-stamped footage, a couple of stills that made my stomach clench. Cindy was visiting an apartment in the Pearl District regularly, always late afternoon or evening, always alone. Sometimes she was dressed in workout clothes, sometimes in the same blazer she wore to gallery events. But every time she stayed for hours and came out looking different, not guilty, not nervous, just satisfied, settled, at ease. The unit was leased under the name T. Williams. A background check showed it belonged to a Thomas Williams, 37, with a minor business profile. Real estate marketing, mostly digital renderings for new builds. He had no criminal history. Just a clean, forgettable resume. What really gutted me, though, was the anniversary. I had left her a small wrapped gift on the bed, something I'd bought months earlier. A vintage art book from her favorite surrealist, signed by the editor. I'd planned to give it to her over dinner, but that dinner never happened. We hadn't spoken in days, and even though I knew better, I couldn't shake the habit of honoring that day. Call it reflex. Or hope. That night, Clark sent me footage. Cindy entered the Pearl apartment at 7:13 p.m. wearing the same dress I'd seen her wear to our second anniversary dinner years ago. She didn't come out until the next morning. I didn't open the gift. Just left it there. Let it collect dust on the edge of the bed we used to share. When I finally walked into the Pearl district later that week, it was just to see the place for myself. I didn't expect to run into either of them. I told myself I wouldn't even get close. Just drive by. But curiosity pulled me out of the car. It was dusk, maybe 7:45 p.m. I parked on the far end of the street near a construction site and made my way slowly up the sidewalk. I didn't have a plan. I was just looking, trying to make sense of it all. When I got close enough to the building, I looked through the first-floor lobby window. It was well-lit, open concept, with big floor-to-ceiling glass. On the second story, through a slatted window just above the coffee shop, I caught a glimpse of what looked like a living space. A chair. A plant. A hanging light fixture shaped like a globe. And then I saw it. My sweater. A navy blue hoodie I thought I lost over a year ago. It was draped over the back of a chair inside the unit. I recognized the small fray on the cuff chewed from when our old dog, Winnie, was still alive. Cindy had hated that sweater. Said it made me look like a college sophomore. But I loved it. I'd looked for it for weeks before finally assuming it got tossed in a donation bag. Now here it was. Inside another man's apartment. My throat tightened. I stood there, staring, not breathing, not blinking. The air around me was still, but inside I felt like I was sinking. That was my sweater. From my home. Worn by the woman who now lived two lives, one in public, one behind closed doors. She hadn't just taken my trust. She'd taken pieces of me with her. Worn them like they meant nothing. Left them behind in someone else's space like forgotten props from an old play. I went back to the rental and didn't sleep. The next morning, Cindy texted me for the first time in over a week. Hope you're okay. Let's talk soon. I stared at it. 14 words. No punctuation at the end. Just that vague, open-ended plea. Not even my name. Not even an acknowledgement of the storm she'd started. I didn't reply. Clark sent the final report 2 days later. It was comprehensive. Photos. Logs. An entire section detailing the dates Cindy entered and exited that unit. In one still, she had a key in hand. Not buzzing in. Not waiting. A key. In another, she was smiling as she left, hair damp, holding a to-go cup with 2 straws sticking out. The final blow came from inside the envelope, an invoice. A bank receipt for a payment made from our joint checking account. The memo line, Art Direction Consulting. It was for $600. Paid to T. Williams. That was it. No more ambiguity. No more second-guessing myself. She hadn't just lied, she'd funded her affair with our money and dressed it up like business. It was a betrayal that went beyond emotional. It was deliberate. Methodical. That same night, I stopped by the house. It still technically belonged to both of us, but I hadn't stepped foot inside since I left. I walked in quietly sometime after 10. I wasn't there to confront her. I was there for closure. Cindy wasn't home. The lights were off, the place was neat. But the bedroom door was cracked open. I stepped inside and saw the gift I had left, still wrapped, still untouched. Sitting exactly where I had placed it. For a second, I thought about taking it back. Unwrapping it. Reclaiming something? But then I noticed something else. On her nightstand, half tucked under a notepad, was a receipt. A dry cleaning ticket. The name on it wasn't hers. It was his. Thomas Williams. I took a photo of it. Left everything else untouched. Back at the rental, I poured a glass of whiskey I didn't want and stared at the wall. Not because I was in shock had long passed. I was angry. But more than that, I was embarrassed. I'd spent the last year making excuses for someone who didn't respect me. Who thought so little of me that she didn't even bother hiding the evidence well. She'd grown sloppy, like she believed she'd never be questioned. Like I'd just keep nodding and swallowing lies. And maybe I would have. If not for that photo. If not for her toast in that bar, the way she looked at me like she was daring me to speak up. I didn't speak then. But now? Now it was my turn. I thought things would go quiet once I had proof. That after the surveillance, the documents, the receipts, the sweater, after all of it, I'd just present the facts, and that would be the end of the story. I'd walk away with a clean break, some painful dignity, and maybe enough peace to start again. But I was wrong. Cindy didn't disappear into shame. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She retaliated. The first sign came 2 days after I served her with divorce papers. The papers were straightforward. My lawyer had laid out the terms cleanly. I wanted my name off the house, full retention of my business, and no alimony, since the proof of her affair and financial deception gave me leverage. I wasn't even going after the gallery money, even though we both knew a chunk of her early funding had come from me. She signed for the envelope the morning it was delivered. That night, I got an email from her lawyer accusing me of emotional neglect and coercive behavior over a sustained period of time. It was laughable if it hadn't been so precise. She had compiled a narrative. That I was controlling, unavailable, dismissive. That I monitored her calls, which I never did, that I withheld affection, that I manipulated her with money. I read through the document once, twice. I knew every word had been rehearsed, every line written with her lawyer's help, massaged into something halfway plausible. And she wasn't done. The next morning, my debit card declined at a gas station in Tigard. I checked the app, account frozen, pending investigation. I called the bank. They told me there had been a flagged complaint from a joint account holder about irregular withdrawals. A fraud lock. I told them the truth. They said they'd investigate, but the damage was done. In one move, she froze my personal and business liquidity. By that afternoon, the joint car was gone from the driveway. I found out later she'd sold it, transferred the title to a man named Kevin J. Riley. No bill of sale. No exchange of funds. Just a signature and a DMV filing. Kevin apparently was a friend of Thomas. A placeholder. A name to hide the trail. That night, my inbox exploded. Not with personal messages, but professional. For clients I'd worked with through my design firm forwarded me emails they'd received from a burner address. The subject line, "Before you trust Logan." Inside were **TS, cherry-picked texts between Cindy and me, clipped from old threads and edited to look sinister. One line I'd written 2 years ago during an argument: "This isn't a debate. You either trust me or you don't." Plucked out of context, it looked cold. Harsh. Another was a **T of my old calendar showing the time blocks I used for client projects. It had been framed as monitoring behavior. One client, a corporate museum in Chicago, called and politely explained they were reevaluating the collaboration. Another ghosted me entirely. The hardest blow came 3 days later. A panel seat I'd been offered at the Northwest Digital Arts Conference was rescinded. The organizer emailed me a vague but cordial note, citing reputational considerations. I didn't need to ask what that meant. I already knew. Cindy was burning the bridge behind me while still standing on it. I confronted her. I didn't yell. Didn't throw accusations. I met her in public, neutral ground. A coffee shop off Hawthorne where we used to go before gallery events. It was early, maybe 8 a.m. She looked polished. Not broken. Not guilty. She sat across from me like it was a business lunch. "I know what you're doing," I said. She didn't flinch. Just sipped her drink and said, "Do you?" "You've **nized everything I've built," I said. "Frozen accounts. Lied in court filings. And now you're going after my work. Why?" She tilted her head like she was genuinely confused. "Because you left," she said simply. "You left like I was nothing." I blinked. "You cheated." "I made a mistake," she replied, her voice calm. "But you turned it into a spectacle. You stalked me. Hired someone. Humiliated me. I protected myself." She leaned in. "You humiliated me, Logan. You made me the woman who got caught. The woman with a man in the city. You didn't even talk to me first. You just vanished. You made me the villain." "You are," I said, staring at her. "You lied for months." She didn't respond right away. Just looked past me out the window. Then I guess I might as well play the role. That was the last time we spoke face to face. Over the next 2 weeks, she doubled down. She started posting cryptic Instagram captions, "Sometimes silence is abuse. The scars that don't show still bleed." Her followers rallied. DMs of support poured in. I saw **TS from mutuals. "Stay strong, girl. You're so brave." I watched as people I had considered friends reshared her posts without asking me once what had happened. One night, someone tagged her in a tweet thread about manipulative partners in creative industries. She reposted it with a broken heart emoji. She was rebuilding herself in the public eye as a survivor. And it was working. Her gallery launched a new series called Reclamation. Mixed media. Acrylic over shredded documents. Installations made of plaster molded from her own hands. I went to the opening, anonymously, and watched people lean in, teary-eyed, whispering about what she'd endured. One woman near the bar murmured, "I heard he ghosted her after 10 years. Another replied, "Some men just can't handle strong women." I left before they finished their drinks. Meanwhile, I scrambled to keep the studio running. My team was loyal, thankfully, but nervous. My name had started appearing on forums, private message boards, even Reddit threads. One post simply said, "Don't work with Logan A. He's toxic behind the scenes. Ask Cindy." I'd never felt so powerless, so misrepresented. I could barely open my laptop without bracing for some new headline, some new email, some new unraveling of the life I'd spent a decade building. It wasn't just about the affair anymore. This was war. And she wasn't just trying to win. She was trying to erase me. It started with an email from someone I barely remembered. Subject line, Cindy, you might need this. At first, I thought it was spam or maybe another insult disguised as outreach. But when I clicked, I saw the name, Megan Reyes. I had met her once, maybe twice. She'd worked as an accountant's assistant at Cindy's gallery about a year ago. She'd seemed quiet, sharp, barely older than 22. Inside the email were attachments. PDFs, screensh*, TS, transaction records. And a short message. "Hi Logan. I know this is weird, but I worked part-time at the gallery last fall and saw a lot of things that didn't sit right with me. I didn't say anything then because I didn't want to get dragged into personal stuff. But now that everything's public, well, I think you should have these. Megan." I downloaded the files, heart pounding. The folder was a goldmine. Invoices labeled as exhibition logistics, paid directly to a Thomas W. Consulting. One of them dated back 7 months, around the same time as Cindy's so-called retreat. Another receipt showed a transfer of $2,000 marked as venue security routed to a personal checking account under the same name. My stomach turned. She had been funding him, hiding it under fake expenses, using gallery funds and worse, funds from our joint account that she disguised as business withdrawals. She didn't just cheat. She embezzled. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, Ben, who called me within the hour. "This is big," he said. "Very big." I paced the rental, still in disbelief. "Is it enough?" "More than enough," he said. "Especially if she listed these on her public filings. If we can show a pattern of deception in her financials, we're not just talking about a favorable divorce settlement. This borders on civil fraud." I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, traction. 2 days later, another unexpected ally reached out. Her name was Kira. She and Cindy had once been inseparable studio roommates back when they were both trying to launch their careers. But they'd had a falling out last year. Something about a gallery showing that got reassigned. Kira messaged me through LinkedIn of all places. She said she wasn't trying to cause drama, but she wanted me to know that, months ago, Cindy had confided in her about having a plan. That she was waiting for the right time to break things off and maximize the split. Her words, not mine. She told me, Kira wrote, that she didn't want to leave the marriage until she had her own income and could spin the narrative in her favor. Said she wanted to be seen as the one who endured. I asked Kira if she'd be willing to make a formal statement. She said yes. Within a week, Ben had collected enough material to refile our motion with the court. We presented Cindy's fake business expenses paired with Kira's statement. We included Megan's documentation and a ledger of account activity showing transfers to Thomas's apartment management under our shared bank. But the real nail in the coffin was an email I hadn't known existed. Megan had forwarded me something else. A message Cindy had sent from her gallery address, intended for Thomas but accidentally CC'd to the gallery's general inbox. Megan had archived it months ago, unsure what to do. In it, Cindy wrote, "By the time Logan figures anything out, I'll be long out of the house and set up clean. He won't risk a public mess. He's too careful. I'll come out of this better. Promise." Reading those lines felt like standing in a cold wind. Not because they were shocking, by now I expected duplicity, but because of how calculated it was. She didn't fall into an affair. She didn't spiral. She mapped it. She staged her own story and cast herself as the victim in a drama of her own making. Ben filed the motion on a Wednesday. We included everything. Financial misconduct, intention to defraud, false public representation, and retaliatory interference with my business. The court admitted the new evidence without hesitation. The tide turned overnight. Cindy's attorney, who had been smug and defensive for weeks, suddenly pivoted. He requested time to reassess her defense. Her gallery's board, yes, the same board that had applauded her reclamation series, quietly reached out to distance themselves from any press. They pulled her from a speaking engagement at the Modern Women in Art Summit. And I was offered a meeting with the very same Chicago museum that had dropped me earlier. Turns out, someone on their board had seen the court filing. "Heard you're fighting back," the rep said. Would love to revisit the commission. I didn't gloat. I didn't respond to Cindy's lawyer when he sent a request for a private mediation to resolve matters amicably. There would be no clean handshake. No grace to spare. She'd spent months rewriting our story in real time, layering it with half-truths and curated captions. She'd *p*nized vulnerability, turned followers into soldiers, and turned me into a silent villain. But now the receipts were public. Now the silence had context. I knew things weren't over. Legal battles are long. Reputation repair even longer. But the shift was real. For the first time in this whole mess, I wasn't drowning in defense. I was building something again. It's strange how allies appear when you least expect it. How the people you once thought were background noise suddenly step into the light with just enough truth to steady you. And it's even stranger how lies, carefully constructed, delicately presented, can unravel so fast once the first seam is pulled. Cindy had been careful, but not careful enough. The court ruled in my favor. The fraud evidence hit harder than I imagined. Cindy's claims of emotional abuse crumbled when cross-examined alongside the timeline of her affair and the misused funds. Her gallery board dissolved their relationship with her entirely. In the final settlement, I retained full ownership of my business, our savings, and was absolved of all spousal support. Cindy walked away with nothing but what she brought in, and a reputation stained beyond repair. Thomas? He disappeared when federal housing officials started circling around misfiled tax credits linked to his marketing firm. Word was he moved states, quietly, alone. Meanwhile, I focused forward. A national museum commissioned me to design an immersive digital exhibit on grief and reconstruction. The work was everything I'd needed: control, vision, healing. I expanded my firm into Seattle and brought on 2 new junior designers. My name started showing up again, this time in journals, podcasts, panels. This time for the right reasons.